Hello all, Rick here. In Star Trek, warp drive is used to fold the fabric of space and move faster than the speed of light by multiple factors. However, this is impractical for general travel within a system and between planets. Although inter-system warp jumps are becoming more commonplace with the precision needed ever more attainable, impulse drive is still the preferred option. Colloquially, impulse speed is used to describe any factor of travel at sublight speeds, but it's a particular technology within a ship. Impulse energies can be supplied by the main warp core of a ship, using the matter-antimatter reaction as fuel, as most of the ship's systems do. However, it's far more common for them to be supplied by their own fusion reactors. These reactors too can be tapped for power when energy is drawn from the system. These reactors can be anything that generates the required power, and eventual electroplasma required to create an impulse effect, as it needs less energy than a full warp reaction. Therefore, impulse is often developed before warp drive, although not always. It does require knowledge of manipulating subspace, and the generation of subspace fields, which are a large component of warp travel, so the two technologies can go hand in hand. In Trek lore, Earth developed impulse drive sometime after the initial warp flight in 2063 in the late 21st century. The fusion reactors are fueled by deuterium and converted into helium plasma. This is then fed through subspace field coils, also known as the driver coils, which act to compress and accelerate the plasma stream into a jet that is channeled through the exhaust. This creates a Newtonian reaction, which propels the ship onwards. This does mean that there is an actual flow of energy being emitted from the impulse engines, unlike warp drive, which produces no such effect. In addition to the compression effect, the impulse drives produce a subspace field around the vessel, to an extent, which can aid in the movement of a ship, but additionally, this can sustain a warp field for some time. It is this effect that permits the saucer section of a Galaxy-class ship to continue coasting along at warp after it had diverged from the engineering hull, but it's not strong enough to create its own warp bubble. The impulse drives have not changed design really since the 23rd century, with the perhaps only factor being the downscaling of such drives. 1/4 impulse speed is recognised as the standard travel velocity when inside a solar system, and full impulse is the equivalent to around 1/4 light speed. Impulse engines can be tailored for various roles with higher manoeuvrability on ships and such as shuttles and escorts, but even larger vessels can be unexpectedly nimble at sublight speeds. This does mean that at sustained high impulse speeds, time dilation is a factor, something not usually dealt with in Trek travel, as warp negates this effect. There can be a level of techno-babble compensation with the subspace fields of impulse drives, but in Apocrypha, approaching very high impulse for a long time can lead to some interesting consequences as time passes slower for the travelling vessel. There's not much else to say on impulse engines, except that there do exist some designs out there, even within Starfleet, that have no visible impulse outlets or rely on a completely different method of locomotion in space. The Nebula class, for example, is a bit of a mystery, but later versions have added some small drives beneath the saucer, but the initial designs had it lacking all impulse exhausts, with behind-the-scenes justifications being that it relied far more on generating a subspace bubble and effectively performing a sort of under-warp speed warp effect to move, while the impulse emissions themselves were shrouded for stealth purposes. Whatever the justification, impulse engines are pretty much the go-to, because it ties into the manipulation of subspace to create the desired thrust, again that magic ingredient being the answer to how things work in Star Trek. Thanks for watching this quick breakdown on impulse engines. I've been Rick and I'll see you later for another video. Goodbye.